Opening notes for the Fantasy Cruiserweight makeover. Here's a bio and history of the division with no further ado. We start on March the 31st, 1980 with Marvin Camel, who beats Mator Mate Palov, a Yugoslavian fighter, by 15-round unanimous decision. Sanctioned by the WBC, Camel goes into the record books as the first junior heavyweight or cruiserweight champion of the world. More champions follow him. We have S.D. Gordon, Carlos De Leon, Alonzo Ratliff, Ozzy Ocasio, Bernard Benton, John Mark Mormek, O'Neal Bell, Johnny the Entertainer Nelson. All competent fighters, none able to set the world alight, none household names. So I often compare the fortunes of the cruiserweight division to the super middleweight division. The super middleweights came 4 years after the cruiserweights. The first super middleweight champion was Murray Sutherland, the Scottish man. He took the vacant crown against Ernie Singletary to go into the record books as the first
super middleweight champion of the world.
But do not be misled. Sutherland was KO'd or stopped 5 times, and all in all was beaten at least 10 times before he got his first shot against the tough but nowhere near world-class Ernie Singletary. So the first super middleweight title fight in effect had 2 decent journeyman fighters contesting it. Kamel and Palov, in fact, in my opinion, are superior fighters, so technically the cruisers get off to a better start than the super middles. Difference being, while cruiserweight champions like Ocasio, De Leon, and Johnny Nelson and S.D. Gordon were prone to stink the place out on regular occasions, the super middleweights rapidly picked up the pace with Thomas Hearns, Iran Barkley, James Toney, Nigel Benn, Sugar Ray Leonard, Roy Jones, Chris Eubanks, Joe Calzaghe, Steve Collins, Mike McCallum, Bernard Hopkins. And even today, we have Andre Ward, Carl Froch, who fight the final for the Super 6 later on this year. Lucien Boutte waits to fight the winner, but only if he gets past Glenn Johnson tonight, which could be a good fight. The perception was that super middleweights were middleweights who couldn't make the weight, or light heavyweights who were too small to compete at light heavyweight. It went from that to an elite division in its own right. No, it doesn't have the legacy of the middleweight division or the lightweight division or the welterweight division. That's because it hasn't been around long enough. So it's an elite division in its own right. The cruiserweights remain unfashionable as ever, with a few highlights from Evander, Holyfield, Dwight, Muhammad, Qawi, David Haye. Today we have the likes of Denis Lebedev, good fighter. He beat Toney last night. We have Marco Hook, good fighter, but they're not quite ready for the pound-for-pound ratings yet. No. Steve Cunningham, competent, not very exciting, but good fighter. The Cuban guy who beat him, decent fighter, but these are not pound for pound. They're not elite fighters by any stretch of the imagination. So we're gonna make over the division with a Fantasy Cruiserweight series. I first listed 10 fighters and had to stretch that to 11 when I forgot one great fighter. If I don't name him, you won't know, and I won't feel so ashamed, so I won't say. You can disagree with any of my selections as you like, agree, disagree, comment, and we can argue robustly, but if you choose to use vile language or profanity in a mean-spirited way, your comments will be removed and you'll be blocked. So this is the Boxing Beats and Rhymes channel saying peace out. Sam Langford, the Boston Terror, or better yet, the Boston Tar Baby, stood at 5'6.5" He fought from the years 1902 till 1926. He fought for the world welterweight title by tackling the infamous Barbados Demon Joe Walcott. Not Jersey Joe won the heavyweight title. This is the welterweight champion, a formidable fighter himself. Now, it's agreed by most that Langford won the decision, but in those days, the newspapers often scored fights and it was rendered a draw. Sam KO'd James Tiger Smith in 1907 for the world middleweight title. Racism prevented Sam and a list of other black heavyweights from competing for the world heavyweight championship. So the colored heavyweight title was birthed, which Sam won by knocking out Harry Wills. The color bar led to Sam, Gene Journay, Sam McVeigh, Wills, Peter Jackson, and Jack Johnson having to fight each other multiple times just to earn a living from their profession. Sam lost the color title to Jack Johnson on points over 15 rounds. He eventually retired in 1926, losing in one round to Brad Simmons, and by this time, he was 43 years of age. To further expound his myth, legend, and brilliance, consider that we attribute arrogance and genius and cockiness in the ring to Muhammad Ali, Roberto Duran, talking to and mocking their opponents while beating them down. Well, we see traits of this later in Ray Leonard, Roy Jones, Nassim Hamed, and Mayweather. But what I'm going to do for you now is play you this piece of audio by Burt Sugar, just to show you how nice Sam was with his hands and his mouth.
He could call a round better than Ali. One time he comes out for a round in England, I don't know if it's second or third, and he touches gloves, and the opponent says, "What are you touching gloves for? This isn't the last round." He said, "For you it is."
Then proceeded to KO Flynn in the same round. That's serious shit, man. Sadly, he left the game penniless and blind, stranded in the Harlem streets. He actually fought the last bout against Brad Simmons, legally blind. If he was alive today, he'd make a fortune. He barely would have made cruiserweight. The highest he's recording at weighing at times is over 180 pounds. Some rank Sam as perhaps the greatest heavyweight or just greatest fighter anyway of all time. He had his own patented moves. The slap block. He was the best at barring on display, which is using the forearm to push down your opponent's punches. Sam is not being spoken about here because I'm nostalgic, because I saw some black and white films and I'm trying to prove myself as a historian that I know some old names, even though they was rudimentary in their style and they was really basically just caveman fighters. Sam was doing feints, like just as good or better than Mayweather, just as good as James Toney, Roy Jones, Ali, Leonard. Full-blown feint. He'd feint 2-3 times, one move, and be in punching range. And he wasn't throwing one shot at a time like you see a lot of the old fighters, no. Sam would throw combinations. And with that great physique, he had extraordinary punching power. Sam would knock out full-blown, good heavyweights, just as easy as he'd knock out welterweights. Sam's said by many to be the best heavyweight of all time, or perhaps the best fighter anyway of all time. He's that good. And that's why he's on the list. Sam Langford, ladies and gentlemen. Sam Langford. Dwight Muhammad Qawi, formerly Dwight Braxton before the Islamic conversion, nicknamed the Camden Buzzsaw, born 1953, standing 5'6.5 inches. Qawi did a bid in Rahway prison where, correct me if I'm wrong, I remember reading he set some weightlifting records of some kind. He turned pro in 1978. Returning to Rahway prison, this time not as a prisoner, but as a professional boxer, he fought a man named James Scott, very tough fighter, an actual prisoner as well. He is actually a world-class light heavyweight. Broadway had a boxing program. I don't know if they still have that. Qawi outpointed Scott over 10 rounds, and in Qawi's next bout, he fought Michael Spinks in a unification. Spinks put his WBA belt on the line, and in the process took Qawi's WBC strap. Spinks handily outpointed Qawi over 12 rounds. And Qawi, in '85, he traveled to South Africa to defeat Piet Cruz in 11 rounds. He dropped him twice to take his WBA title. He defended it twice, then lost the belt on points to Evander Holyfield. In a fight till up to this day, I think that Qawi won. This bout is recognized as one of the greatest cruiserweight title fights ever. Holyfield getting hospitalized, burning muscle, dehydrated, and all types of crap was happening to him after a dire struggle. They had a rematch in '87 with a much improved Holyfield and a deteriorating Qawi. This time Holyfield managed to brush him aside in 4 rounds. Immediately Dwight moved up to heavyweight to tackle Big George Foreman, giving Big George his first real test in his latest comeback. Qawi was able to land hook after hook with both hands. When George found the range with the jab, it was a wrap. A tiring Qawi was hit several times with booming right hands and stopped on his feet. Dwight was effectively from the Joe Frazier school of fight, brilliant at bobbing and weaving and making his opponent miss. And at 5'6.5" he had a pretty good jab, which is incredible since he would have been outreached by virtually every opponent he faced. He threw beautiful combinations inside, using his short arms to his advantage with swift combinations. He had a great chin, and although never a superstar in terms of marketing, even in his peak years, the people in the trade knew just how good Dwight was, and that's why I have him on my list. Dwight Muhammad Qawi, people. Give it up. Michael Spinks, born and raised in St. Louis on the 13th of July, 1953, standing 6'2.5". The man with a right-hand punch, infamously named the Jinx. He won the 1976 middleweight gold medal in Montreal. His brother Leon, who went on to fight and beat Muhammad Ali, he took the light heavyweight gold in the same tournament. Michael turned pro in '77, remaining undefeated for 4 years, beating tough contenders like Marvin Johnson and Yaki Lopez before securing a title shot against the tough and hard-punching and skilled Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. Eddie was the WBA champion. Michael went on to outpoint the champ to win his first world title. This was in 1982. Michael defended the belt 5 times before outpointing Dwight Muhammad Qawi, taking his WBC title. Eventually, Michael becomes undisputed champion, outpointing tough contender Eddie Davis to take the vacant IBF strap. He goes on to defend his undisputed crown twice more, before moving up to heavyweight to tackle Larry Holmes for the heavyweight championship. Michael manages to stop Larry from equaling Rocky Marciano's 49-0 record by controversially, and in my opinion, wrongly being gifted a split decision win. The rematch in 1986 is no less controversial, with Spinks squeaking past Holmes with another tight decision. He defends the title by beating soft touch and European champion Stephen Tankstead. He goes on to floor Jerry Cooney twice and stop him in 5 rounds. which led to his last bout, which he is unfairly and harshly remembered for, despite all his great accomplishments, when he fought a prime Mike Tyson, who, despite winning the unification tournament, which Spinks opted out of, and claiming all the 3 major belts, Tyson still had his doubters. These doubters would question his validity as undisputed heavyweight champion, as Spinks was the linear champion, as recognized by the Ring magazine. And what you have to understand, it's not like today where you have the internet and you have a million sites to access boxing information. The Ring magazine was like a Bible. It carried almighty weight. With his old school manifesto, he only recognized 8 divisions like the old school. He only recognized the linear champions. Really old school. So they still have Spinks as the linear champion, because Spinks beat Holmes, Holmes beat Norton, Holmes beat Ali, and you can literally trace back Spinks's belt to John L. Sullivan's reign. So we have 2 undefeated champions fighting for the biggest prize of all in sport. Tyson at this time, though, was unbeatable. He had Michael intimidated way before the bell sounded. He went on to KO Michael in a minute or so, dropping him twice on the way, and ruthlessly dispatching him and ending his career. But the bigger point is what Michael would have did if he moved up to cruiser. Instead of challenging Holmes in 1985, my bet is he would have had as much success as he did at light heavyweight and heavyweight. Maybe more. His only possible challenges could have came from Dwight Muhammad Qawi, who he defeated already at light heavy, or up-and-coming Evander Holyfield. Because Spinks was that good, and that's why he's on the list. Give it up for Michael Spinks, ladies and gentlemen. David Haye, born on the 13th of October 1980 in Bermondsey, London, standing 6'3" with a boxing style that Dwight would describe as an ambush fighter. After losing in Belfast to Orlando Solis in the final of the World Amateur Championships at heavyweight in 2001, Haye turned pro in 2002, winning his first 10 or 11 bouts by KO before running into seasoned and experienced big punching Carl the Cat Thompson. This bout came a little too early for Haye, who rocked Thompson repeatedly, looked like stopping the tough veteran at times, but his inexperience got exposed by the former British, European and world champion Thompson, and he decked Haye on the route, stopping him in the 5th. Haye was able to regroup, however, and within a few fights, he claimed the European Cruiserweight title, knocking out Gurov, an Eastern European fighter, in 8 seconds. He defended the belt 3 times before traveling to France to fight Jean-Marc Mohamed, the WBA and WBC champion, on his own turf. The fight was fairly even after 6. Haye recovering from a heavy knockdown in the 4th to KO Mohamed in the 7th round and become the main man at cruiserweight. He ruthlessly took Enzo Macronelli's WBO belt to confirm his dominance of the division, violently flooring Enzo and stopping him in 2 rounds. Making the cruiserweight limit of 200 pounds, however, was becoming an increasing struggle for the man dubbed the Haymaker. So he moves up a division. No longer able to make the weight and the lure of the big money, he fights Monty Barrett in a tune-up, which he wins in about 6, 7 rounds, maybe 8. Straight after that, he travels to Germany to fight Nikolai Valuev for the WBA championship. Valuev, the biggest champion since Primo Carnera. Valuev standing over 7 foot. Big rascal, man, that. Haye upset the odds, however, to dethrone the giant on points, staggering him in the last round, and winning handily, in my opinion, controversially to a lot of others, but I feel he done enough to win it. He becomes WBA heavyweight champion. That was in 2009. And after cashing in on his newly won belt against cannon fodder challengers like John Ruiz and Audley Harrison, he loses his belt in the same country he won it, in Germany against WBO and IBF champion Vladimir Klitschko, whose long-lived jab and weight advantage proved too much for David, as Vlad landed single jabs and leaned on his opponent in a forgettable fight. Haye has since announced his retirement at 31 years of age. I have a feeling David will likely be the most hated and controversial inclusion in my Cruiserweight makeover series. David's cocky, dismissive demeanor rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, but he was a cruiser who carried knockout power and always went for the KO. Winning the WBA heavyweight crown against Valuev shouldn't be sniffed at either. Not many cruisers have done that. In fact, apart from Holyfield off the top of my head, I can't think of no one else. Am I slightly biased because he's a Londoner? I don't think so, but maybe I am. In my opinion, an undisputed cruiserweight moving up to heavy and taking a portion of the world title at the weight deserves his props. And for that, give it up for David the Haymaker Haye. Roy Jones, born in Pensacola, Florida, on the 16th of January 1969, standing 5'11". Let's start with the Seoul Olympics in 1988, where Roy dazzled us with his blinding hand speed, footwork, and sheer genius. So much so that at the final bell of the super welterweight final against Park Si-hun, anyone with an iota of honesty or boxing knowledge would have thought that the judges' scorecards were irrelevant, as he outboxed and dominated the Korean, outpunching him at a rate of at least 3-1. Unfortunately for Roy, mass corruption reared its ugly head and robbed him of his gold medal. Instead, he took the Val Barker Best Boxer Award, and this decision prompted the change in scoring in amateur boxing. Now you have the system where the 3 judges have to all agree a punch landed, but that's another video for another time, as it's a ridiculous system. Roy turned pro as a junior middle, unbeaten after 20 or 21 or so fights. Now a full-fledged middleweight, he outpointed future IBF middleweight Hall of Famer Bernard Hopkins unanimously. He makes 4 defenses before flooring the off-balance James Toney and proceeding to outspeed and outbox and unanimously outpoint Toney for the IBF super middleweight crown. He defends this 6 times, defeating the likes of Mike McCallum on points. He loses his first fight by disqualification to Montel Griffin. He avenged this blemish by destroying Montel in a round, flooring him twice and ruthlessly KOing him, taking back his WBC belt in the process. He goes on to fight the skilled and hard-punching WBA belt holder, Lou Del Val. In this fight, Jones is floored for the first time in his career. He recovers well enough to outpoint Del Val and relieve him of his WBA belt. He goes on to fight David Telesco for the vacant IBF strap. Telesco, a very tough fighter, was outclassed over 12 rounds. More and more fighters become victims to the gifted Jones, who, according to BoxRec, gathered 6 titles and held them simultaneously at light heavyweight. Jones was bored with the game to a degree, playing basketball before one defense against Eric Lucas, going on to bust him up in 10 rounds. In one defense against Glenn Kelly, Jones, with his back against the ropes, held his hands behind his back, feinted a couple of times as the incoming Kelly charged in, a right hook out of nowhere, put Kelly on the floor, finishing the bout. Now, there's a dude on YouTube named Bro Panic. He's into metaphysics and matters of such. I subscribe to his videos on YouTube. He would probably call that some God shit, as only exceptional athletes can do feats like that. So that's 3 divisions Roy's cleared out now. No challenges left. There's no challenges at cruiserweight, so he bypasses that division. He's made everyone look relatively ordinary. His only task now is to become the heavyweight champion. He challenges John Ruiz for the WBA heavyweight championship. Roy makes light of the weight and height disadvantages and outpoints Ruiz handily. Once again, Jones adds to his growing legacy. But this part of the tribute is a mystery. Not just to me, but to boxing fans worldwide. What happened to Roy Jones after the Ruiz fight? We would never witness the miracles he performed over 14 years again. And it's hard to pin down one factor. Did he just deteriorate overnight? Was it the weight he lost after the Ruiz fight to come back down to light heavyweight? Regardless of what the answers are, what follows is amazing. He loses by KO to Antonio Tarver, to Glenn Johnson, to mediocre fighters. Not mediocre, I apologize to the Australian fans. But to Danny Green, Denis Lebedev, points defeats to Calzaghe, Bernard Hopkins, and any pretensions of Roy ever being a world-class operator again. Unfortunately, he still fights on today. I tend to just remember the first 14 years of brilliance he showed us in his career. And I believe if he moved up to heavyweight, to cruiserweight in March 2003 rather than heavyweight, he would have just dominated it like he did the middleweight, the super middleweight, the light heavyweight, and heavyweight. Whatever. Roy Jones is a legend of my generation, and that's why he's on the list. Roy Jones, ladies and gentlemen, Roy Jones. Give it up, please. James Toney, born on 24th of August 1968 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, standing 5 foot 10 inches tall. He turned pro in 1988 and amassed a record of 26 wins and a draw. He then challenged Michael Nunn, the unbeaten champion who held the IBF strap. Nunn, although a defensive fighter, was a pound-for-pound contender back then. He built up a lead, an early lead, which Toney appeared to be clawing back in rounds 8, 9, and 10. Toney seems to sense that he needs to up the pace now and proceeds to attack with purpose. One dynamite left hook catches Nunn. Boom! Down he goes. The fight looks over. But Nunn bravely gets back to his feet and tries to survive, but Toney won't be denied. Throwing shots from all angles. He finishes in style and takes the belt. He made several defenses, including 2 wins over Mike McCallum. He moved up to super middleweight and outclassed the tough, hard-punching Iran Barkley, who couldn't come out for the 10th, Toney picking up the IBF belt in the process. He lost the belt after several defenses to the magical Roy Jones, in a bout that I've covered already in Roy Jones's bio. He moved up to light heavy, winning a few belts, but none that I consider to be legitimate world titles. In 2003, he participated in one of the greatest cruiserweight fights ever, against the uncompromising Russian cruiserweight champion who held the IBF title, named Vasily Jirov. Jirov attacked Toney from the opening bell, trying to break Toney's will. Toney used his great upper body movement and that skill that, for the most part, you cannot really teach, which is judging distance. Toney was able to counter with both hands, and although he got hit, he was able to contain Jirov's ferocious attack and will to win. The fight hung in the balance until the 11th, when Jirov was deducted a point for a low blow. In the 12th and final round, Toney landed combination after combination, and eventually the Iron Chin Russian went down. He somehow got up and survived to the final bell, and Toney ran out a deserving winner by unanimous decision. He opted not to defend the title. He moved up to heavyweight and KO'd Evander Holyfield. He then won by unanimous decision against John Ruiz for the WBA heavyweight championship. The result was later turned to a no contest verdict when Toney was checked for a banned substance. As I write this, Toney just lost to Denis Lebedev in Russia as he moves back down to cruiserweight. And he frankly looked terrible in this bout, and maybe it's time to give up the ghost. But as a multiple world champion, one of the greatest defensive fighters, one of the best counter punchers, one of the greatest chins of our generation, there's no doubt he's more than worthy of this list. And that's why I have him on here. James Toney, everybody. Give it up for James Toney. Bob Foster, born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, 27th of April, 1938, standing 6'3.5" tall. Foster debuted as a pro in 1961. He racked up 9 wins before running into what would be the Achilles heel for the remainder of his career, and that's a full-blown, world-class heavyweight. This time in the form of fringe contender Doug Jones, who KO'd Foster in 8 rounds. Foster runs off 3 more KO wins before running into another heavyweight, this time in the form of Ernie Terrell, who 8 months after KOing Foster in 7, wins the WBA heavyweight championship via 15-round unanimous decision over Eddie Machin. Foster accumulated another winning streak of 8 KOs before running into heavyweight contender Zora Foley, who unanimously outpointed Foster over 10 rounds. Another streak of 8 KOs followed for Foster. Then he challenged a very good fighter and a very good champion in Dick Tiger, only this time, this is in Foster's domain, the light heavyweight division. Foster proceeds to KO Tiger, a fighter who's very durable, only stopped twice in nearly 80 bouts. He takes his WBC and WBA light heavyweight belts. A savage left hook, finishing the bout. Foster proceeded to run off the usual long KO streak of non-title fights and defenses of the crown before running into heavyweight champion Joe Frazier, who brutally brushes Bob aside in 2 rounds. Bob just doesn't learn. He can't beat these heavies. But once again, Foster brushes himself off makes another 7 or 8 defenses of his light heavyweight crown, with only Ray Anderson managing to go the distance, before he runs into another heavyweight, this time maybe the greatest fighter of all time, Muhammad Ali. He killed Bob in 8. Once again, Foster brushed himself off, defended light heavyweight title 3 more times, then retired in 1974 after drawing with George Ahumada. I don't know if I pronounced that right. He returned in 1975 and fought 7 more times in the next 3 years, winning 5 and losing his last 2. Foster is a Hall of Famer. The kill streaks he amassed, defending his light heavyweight title between losing to world-class heavies, speaks for itself. And at 6'3", he had more than enough height to fight at heavyweight, but he just didn't have the physicality to bridge the gap. And bear in mind, the heavyweight division today is not in great shape. I don't have no empirical evidence, but I'm willing to bet that Floyd, Money Mayweather, and Manny Pacquiao draw bigger purses than Vladimir and Vitaly Klitschko, which is a rare phenomenon in boxing where the lighter weights actually can bid for bigger purses than the big guys. It does happen. You have fighters like Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hearns, Roberto Duran, Oscar De La Hoya. It does happen, but traditionally the money's at heavyweight, and that's why Foster tried to compete there. If there was a cruiserweight division in that period, he would have made that his domain, just like he did the light heavyweight. Foster is in the Julian Jackson League of punchers, one of the world's greatest punchers in the history of the sport. And that's why he's on the list. Bob Foster, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for Bob Foster. Evander Holyfield, born in Atlanta, Georgia, standing at 6'2.5", birth date October the 19th, 1962, nicknamed the Real Deal or the Warrior, and one of the most popular fighters of our generation. I first became aware of Holyfield in the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics. The gold medal appeared to be in the bank until he squared off against Kevin Barry in the light heavyweight semi-final. Holyfield killed the New Zealander on the break and got himself disqualified. He turned pro as a light heavy in '84 and filled out to a cruiserweight. So advanced was Holyfield that Lou Duver and George Benton were confident enough to fry him into the lion's den in only his 12th pro fight against Dwight Muhammad Qawi. This risky piece of matchmaking and strategy nearly blew up in their faces as Holyfield took a disputed split verdict. He unified all the belts by stopping Ricky Parkey and Carlos De Leon to take the IBF and WBC belts to add to the WBA strap. With no more pickings left at cruiser, he moved up to heavyweight and knocked out Buster Douglas in 3 to become the undisputed champion of the world. He made 3 defenses, then lost to the very talented Riddick Bowe. He regained the belt from Bowe a year later by majority decision. In his next defense against Michael Moorer, where Holyfield allegedly had a heart attack during the action, he lost a majority decision. He outpunched Mike Tyson to score an 11th round TKO and take Tyson's WBA belt. He dominated Tyson throughout the bout, stopping Mike in fine style in 10. He avenged the Michael Moorer loss in 1997, taking Moorer's IBF strap along with the W. He lost both the belts to Lennox Lewis in 1999 by unanimous verdict. In 2001, in 2 fights in succession, he failed to take John Ruiz's WBA belt. His skills obviously now eroded, losing a unanimous decision against light-hitting but elusive Chris Bird for the vacant IBF belt. 2 more title attempts come about, one against Sultan Ibragimov for the WBO belt in 2007. This bout ended in a unanimous points loss. The other against Nikolai Valiev was a more controversial decision. but still ended up with the real deal losing a majority decision in Switzerland. He still fights on today at the age of 49, and despite still having an impressive physique, he is not the force he once was. But let's sum this up. Holyfield is one of the greatest fighters of all time. Durable, fast, determined, well-conditioned, always prepared to go toe-to-toe in some of the best fights I've ever seen at cruiserweight or heavyweight. He is arguably one of the top 10 heavyweights of all time, but that's another debate for another video. He's probably got the best cruiserweight record out of all the fighters I've listed, and you won't find a fighter with a bigger heart than Evander Holyfield. So give it up, ladies and gentlemen, for Evander Holyfield. Ezzard Charles. Born on the 7th of July, 1921 in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Standing 6 feet tall, Ezzard turned pro in 1940. After amassing a 14-bout win streak, he lost his first fight over 10 rounds to Ken Overland. Overland, a former middleweight champion of the world. Ezzard scored 2 10-round unanimous points wins over Charlie Burley, another 2 against future light heavyweight champion Joey Maxim, who he beat twice more in the 50s, more than likely at heavyweight. He won 4 out of 5 meetings with the brilliant Jimmy Bivens. He beat Archie Moore. He won 2 out of 3 with the dangerous Lloyd Marshall. That resume alone tells you how stiff the competition was and how great a light heavyweight he was. He won 2 out of 4 bouts with Jersey Joe Walcott. The first time in 1949, he outpointed Walcott over the 15-round limit for the vacant National Boxing Association World Heavyweight title. And in the third meeting, Walcott becomes the oldest man at that time to win a heavyweight championship at the age of 37. Winning by KO in the 7th round, it was a massive upset. In between the Walcott fights, he made a defense against Joe Louis, a successful defense, in 1950. This bout is relevant because it took this bout for him to really be recognized as the Universal Champion. Also, this bout is significant because referee Zach Clayton becomes the first black referee to officiate a heavyweight championship bout. In the period of 1953, Ezzard's skills deteriorate, losing to fighters he once would not have. He retired in 1959, not financially secure. And in an attempt to make ends meet, he forced to undergo the undignified spectacle of trying his hand at professional wrestling. I have no doubt in my mind if a cruiserweight division existed back then, that more often than not, Ezzard would come out on top. In saying that, the competition in such a division, if it existed then, would have been outstanding. So there'd be no guarantee that the title wouldn't exchange hands a lot, with fighters like Jimmy Bivens, Harold Johnson, Bob Satterfield, Archie Moore, and more than I can remember. Historians often compare Ezzard to Evander Holyfield, I guess because they're both aggressive boxers, stroke punchers. Plus, they both come from Georgia. I remember once watching a videotape of Ezzard fighting Rocky Marciano in a classic. All I can say is Rocky Marciano's chin is made of granite. Ezzard hit Rocky with combinations round after round, busting him up pretty badly and should have got the decision. But them's the breaks. Historians often say that Ezzard is the best light heavyweight, barring none, and that's no mean feat, considering the competition. And that's why he's on the list. So give it up for the Cincinnati Flash, Ezzard Charles. born on the 25th of June, 1895 in Salt Lake City. Standing 6'1", nicknamed the Manasseh Mauler. When Jack Dempsey turned pro in 1914, he managed to amass mostly a winning record with a few draws before running into fireman Jim Flint, who KO'd Jack in one round. At this stage, nobody was touting Jack for the stardom, fame, and riches that he was destined to get. But with the help of his new manager, Jack Cairns, and his promotional skills, and not to forget, Jack carried 2 wrecking balls in both fists, they managed to secure a shot at Jess Willard, who just dethroned Hall of Famer Jack Johnson. The location was the Bayview Park Arena. It was a sweltering hot day. Jack hammered the 6'6", 245-pound Willard, flooring him several times in the first round. The 7th knockdown came late in the round. Willard struggled to his feet. The bell sounded to end the round. Dempsey, thinking the fight was over, exited the ring, but Willard actually got up at the count of 6 or 7, and the fight was still on. Jack Cairns, Dempsey's manager, screamed frantically at Dempsey to get back in the ring. "Jack, get back," fearing he would forfeit the bout. Jack came back to outpunch and beat the crap out of Willard, who somehow survived into the 3rd round, and wisely decided not to come out in the 4th. Rumors persist that Dempsey's gloves had the Margarito treatment, but that remains an unfounded rumor. Dempsey defended his title very sparingly, preferring the high life, acting, dating actresses, and basically living the life of a socialite. When he decided to defend his title against Toney, he found himself outspared and outboxed and relieved of his title. The rematch spawned the infamous long count, where Toney was afforded well over the permitted 10 seconds to get up from the knockdown. He survived that and proceeded to outbox Jack and retire him. Dempsey weighed 187 pounds when he fought Jess Willard, so there's no doubt in my mind he would have made a deadly cruiserweight. There are stories that exaggerate Dempsey's legend, like how he broke Willard's jaw, his eye socket, and his ribs. Then you have the rags to riches story of Jack being a hobo. All these stories are a little sketchy. He was actually an itinerant laborer, taking work whenever he could. He fought at the local clubs as Kid Blackie or Young Dempsey. Then you have the Luis Firpo story, the Argentinian heavyweight who Dempsey defended against. They billed Firpo as the wild bull of the Pampas and built him up as some crazed psycho, when in truth he was a modest farmer and a fighter with a little bit of a punch and not much else. He did, however, punch Dempsey through the ropes and out the ring. Dempsey climbed back in there and knocked Firpo out. Dempsey had a ruthless streak too, punching Jack Sharkey low 2 or 3 times. When Sharkey turned to the referee for protection, Dempsey simply and rightly so kept punching and knocked Sharkey out with a short left hook. Jack and his manager, Jack Cairns, declined to fight black heavyweight contender Harry Wills. This is a slight black eye on his record, in my opinion, but let's not hold that against Jack. That was the state of play in society as a whole. But to sum up, a ferocious fighter was Dempsey, with wrecking balls in both hands. And the fact that Jack was never a 200-pound plus heavyweight, in my opinion, would have made him a formidable cruiserweight in any era. And that's why he's on the list, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for the Manasseh Mauler, Jack Dempsey. Archie Moore, born on the 18th of December, 1916 in Mississippi. Birth name Archibald Lee Wright. Ring name the Old Mongoose, standing 5'11". His record 185 wins, 23 losses. 131 of these wins coming by KO, which I believe is a record KO ratio for a pro boxer. Safe to say, this record will not be broken, at least in mine or your lifetime. Archie made his debut on the 3rd of September 1935 against Billy Sims in Missouri. His opponent Sims scored a quick knockout on the bill already before facing more. Archie actually wasn't on the bill, and for some reason that the BoxRec site where I got this story doesn't state, Archie was called from the audience to fight Sims. Archie KO'd Sims in 2 rounds. People like to talk about the good old days, but the good old days ain't really all that. Archie had to wait 16 years for a title shot, man. Fighting the likes of Holman Williams, Charlie Burley, Bob Satterfield, Jimmy Bivens, Harold Johnson, and more often than not, Archie would come out victorious. Archie lost a number of fights to Ezzard Charles, but there's no way he should have been denied a title shot so long. He defended his title numerous times in between non-title bouts. Archie beat a few decent heavies such as Nino Valdez, who he outpointed twice but could never get past hard-punching heavyweight champions like Rocky Marciano and Floyd Patterson, who both KO'd Moore in title defenses. Moore actually decked Marciano before getting KO'd in the 9th. He later lost to Cassius Clay, a.k.a. the soon-to-be Muhammad Ali. Archie is widely recognized as the man who brought the cross-arm defense to prominence. I'm going to steer clear from saying he single-handedly invented the technique because I'm not 100% sure. Please drop a comment if you know of any fighter who implemented it before Archie. Archie, I believe, used to train Ali for a brief stint before they actually both fought. He also trained George Foreman, who implemented the cross-arm defense. Other fighters who borrowed the cross-arm defense from Archie was Joe Frazier, Ken Norton, Tim Witherspoon. Imagine Archie Moore as a cruiserweight today, especially if he wasn't made to wait 16 years for a title shot. Archie scored 131 KOs, man. I'm just thinking he would have just reigned a long time and just knocked out a lot of contenders. And that's why he's on the list, man. Give it up for the old mongoose, Archie Moore.